The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz, along with my co-host Dan Rylance, and we're very pleased to welcome to the show tonight our Winnebago County District Attorney Christian Gossett. And so, Christian, you were beginning to think we were never going to have you back on again, right?
I knew we had talked about it back after the election, so
you
I knew it
cornered me in the parking lot one day.
I did. I found you.
You did, and you know, we've just, as you probably know, the school district and the city has been keeping us hopping at every turn. So.
And as happening.
You betcha there is, and as a matter of fact, this show, just for the audience's benefit, we're going to have to split this show in two because in the second half we'll be joined by Oshkosh Common Councilor Jess King and our City Parks Director Tom Stephany to talk about some stuff going on there. So. Anyway, welcome and thanks for your patience and for being here tonight. So,
thank you.
You've been in office about 9 months now.
Correct.
How has it been going so far?
I think it's going very well. We're making a lot of progress. We've completely changed the way we do business in the DA's office, and I'm liking the results that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that you've done is, you know, you inherited a caseload of, I think it was over 800 cases when you took office 9 months ago, and as of the end of July, it was reduced to what, about 130 or something like that?
Yeah. At the start of the year, we had 832 misdemeanor and felony cases. Going back to 2001, and as of, actually the most recent numbers I have is as of October 7th, we had 76 total misdemeanor and felony cases under review, with 27 of those being over 30 days in our office, and with 13 being over 60 days.
So what do you attribute, you know, your ability to have reduced that to?
Well, we've done several things. The first week that I was in office, the first thing that we did was we specialized our attorneys. So we now have attorneys responsible for a particular area of the law. And by doing that, the goal was to make them more efficient at what they do. Obviously, if 1 minute you're addressing a sexual assault of a child case, and then you turn around and you're dealing with an arson case or a battery case, you're constantly checking to see if there's anything that's changed in the law. You're constantly going back to the statute books to see how the enhancers work with that particular type of offense, or going to the jury instructions to see what the elements are to make sure that you can make the case. When you're doing the same types of cases primarily, you become familiar with it, and you don't have to spend so much time doing the research on it. So that's helped out tremendously. One of the other things that we did was we took our backlog of cases and we distributed those according to the specializations for the attorneys. So not only was that going to help with cases going forward, but also the cases that we had in our office. So we did those two things, and I think that helped people more efficiently process the cases. When it comes to simple misdemeanor cases, disorderly conduct, criminal damage to property, things of that sort, we got together with the courts, and the courts authorized us to file what we're calling short form complaints on those matters, where if the total police reports are 7 pages or less, we just review it, make charging decisions, put together pretrial offers, and we attach those reports to the criminal complaint face sheet. What that's doing is saving us approximately 20 minutes per misdemeanor case, because normally the attorney would review those. They'd basically dictate a summary of it. A secretary would type those up, give them back to the attorney. The attorney would review it to make sure it was right, make the corrections, give it back to the legal secretary, who would then type in those corrections, and then we'd get it signed.
Okay.
And on those more basic cases like that, it really wasn't paying to have that sort of time in. And we're probably talking about 1,600 misdemeanor cases that fit that description each year. So a lot of time. We also started breaking things down and analyzing what we do per minute. Okay. And I think that's something that's eluded many people in the office before, but prosecution, unlike what you see on TV, is really legal factory work. With the volume that we do and the number of prosecutors we have, when you break it down, we have approximately 51 minutes per criminal case from start to finish.
Wow.
So the things you see on TV with prosecutors following detectives around and interviewing witnesses, you know, that's not the real world of prosecution. And when you think about it, starting with we have to read the police reports, we have to make charging decisions, we have to prepare criminal complaints, we have to do motions, trials may come about. 51 minutes is not much time. So
No,
we're
it's
moving
not.
fast.
One thing, Christian, as far as the specialization goes, now even though they are dealing in a specialization type mode, if you will, they're still capable, if someone's on vacation or whatever, to pick up someone else's slack,
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
And the specialization is primarily with felony cases.
Okay.
So most of our attorneys will not only have their specialized felony caseload, but they'll get a mix of the general misdemeanors as well. Okay. So we're trying to not burn them out on a particular area, but still have the best representation for the community that we can in the courtrooms.
Sure.
What's the size of your present budget, just for our viewers, and what are you asking for the next year?
Okay, well, our budget is a little bit tricky because we have our budget's
You
two
get federal and
parts.
state funds?
Well, we get state and county.
State and county, okay.
So the state pays for the 10 attorneys and our computers and a couple little things. The county pays for the rest of what we have, the office space, the legal secretaries, our victim witness staff, and our investigators. Our budget for the county is approximately $1,015,000. The majority of that goes to salary, benefits, things of that sort. And then from there it's broken down. We have different functions that we have to do. Victim witness services. Excuse me. Victim witness services. In 2006 we served 4,678 victims and witnesses with 3 victim witness specialists. If you start thinking it through with all the court hearings that come up, we're constantly sending out mailings. Our print budgets are pretty high. We have to copy criminal complaints, make discovery for defendants, mail out subpoenas, or not mail out subpoenas, mail out these victim witness notifications. We have to personally serve our citizen witnesses. We have, I believe, $49,000 set aside just for serving subpoenas. And the only reason we're able to keep that figure under $100,000 is because we serve as many as we can in-house. So we also have some budget money set aside for expert witnesses. And in the CSI world, experts are getting to be a bigger part of what we do, but also the felony caseload. I guess just to sort of explain a little bit, there's different levels of criminal offenses, and misdemeanors are punishable by up to 1 year in jail. Felonies are punishable by more than a year in jail, so that's what you can go to prison for, are the felonies. And in the last 10 years, we've seen the felony caseload in Winnebago County go from 453 to 970. This year we'll probably go over 1,000, but at the same time, because we haven't been getting the resources from the state that we need, as a percentage of what we handle in the office, that's gone from 14% up to 31%. So 31% of our criminal caseload right now is felonies. And when you get into felonies, now you're talking about sexual assaults of children, where you'll have an interview through the Child Advocacy Center. You'll have the recorded interviews. You'll have the expert who interviews the child. We'll have DNA experts. We have crash reconstruction experts on our OWI homicides or great bodily harm cases. Even getting the medical examiner up is very expensive. And so as the felony caseload goes up, the use of experts goes up. you add the CSI effect, and it goes up even higher. I mean, it's just the reality of the world we live in.
Shared revenue less coming from the state to the county would hurt you?
It certainly would not hurt us, but
hurt you.
the state, even at their level, what's hurting us more right now is what the state's doing to us than the county. The county's doing everything they can.
What is the state doing to you?
Well, the state, this could be a diatribe. You go on this one for a while.
You're on camera.
There you go. Yeah, I'll try not to use it as my soapbox. There was a lab report that came out looking at the numbers in 2005, and the state said you're now 3.6 prosecutors short. So we're essentially 4 prosecutors short.
Okay.
If you remember the numbers, 5,713 cases prosecuted out of that office last year with 10 attorneys. That's 571 cases per attorney. That's the number that they use to determine that we should have 14 prosecutors in the office, but they won't fund more than 10. What they're not counting are the 1,900 cases that weren't prosecuted because we just don't have the resources to address that many cases. So with what we're doing right now, we should have 4 more prosecutors. If we actually wanted to, or if the state wanted to provide adequate staffing to ensure that everybody in Winnebago County was represented as best we could, we would actually need 17 or 18 prosecutors, but we've only got 10. And that probably doesn't mean much to most of your viewers, but in Winnebago County, I believe there's about 300 police officers. Well, even with what the state's saying for 4 prosecutors, take 90 of the police officers off the street, and that's the level that the DA's office is staffed at. If you look at the cases that we're not able to put in, go ahead and take out about 140 police officers. Well, certainly if you tried to take that number of police officers off the street, everybody would go berserk. That would be insane. But that's the reality of what the state has done to us at the prosecution.
So you probably won't have more than 10?
No. In fact, for this next budget, there's no proposals. Currently, there's 424 prosecutors in the state of Wisconsin. According to the lab report, we need 117 more, and that's still not looking at what we could do if we had the personnel.
I got a question, a couple of them actually, concerning these cases not prosecuted and the lack of, attorneys that you feel that you need in order to do the job. The ones that aren't being prosecuted, are those included in that, Christian? Are those ones that are, they're doing plea bargains and they're settling out of court, or are they just not being...
They're just not being put in.
Not charged out at all?
Yeah. Oftentimes, what we'll see in the ones that aren't prosecuted, I think probably the vast majority of those, it'll be something like a disorderly conduct. Certainly we're not non-processing sexual assaults of children because we don't have the resources. That'll never happen. And that's why that felony caseload has grown to 31% of our caseload. Okay. In that time that we saw us go from 453 felonies to 970, we saw the misdemeanors go from 2,900 to 2,200. Okay. So what's happening is we're addressing the most serious cases, but because we're utilizing the resources there, we don't have the resources for the less serious. So a lot of things that we do could also be handled at what's called the ordinance level. Ordinance level is where the municipalities will take care of it themselves, and you'll end up with a fine. Speeding tickets, for example, are ordinance violations. But you can also have ordinances for underage drinking, in some cases possession of drug paraphernalia. Disorderly conduct is a big one. You get a couple people yelling and screaming back and forth and pushing outside a bar. Sure. We'll probably send that back and say, okay, handle it as an ordinance. Because we need our resources in other places.
We're one municipal attorney short these days, too.
I know. Well, it really has a trickle-down effect. Yeah. And in fact, there was just a story done a little while ago talking about the state not adequately funding public defenders' offices, and that's costing Winnebago County, I think the end total was about $250,000 a year. That's essentially a quarter of the budget that we have for prosecution. The taxpayers in Winnebago are having to spend on private attorneys for people who can't afford attorneys because the public defender's office isn't adequately funded.
Sure. Let me play devil's advocate here for a minute. Okay, some studies and some are saying you're 4 attorneys short in your office for the amount of cases that you're prosecuting, and yet someone else might say, well, how can they have an attorney shortage? Look at all these cases that they've disposed of. nearly 700 in some cases in, 9 months' time.
Yeah.
How would you respond to that?
Well, I guess I'd respond to it by they should see the state of the office. I remember going to lunch once. We try to go to lunch once a week with all of the attorneys, and I think it was in May we had gone to a lunch, and I just looked around the table, and you could just see people are getting tired. And
they're working a lot of weekends, aren't they?
Oh yeah. You can stop by the DA's office pretty much any time and somebody's there working. Our prosecutors do not get overtime. They do not get comp time. And if you've been a state prosecutor for 8 years or less, you're also still at the bottom of the pay scale. So these people aren't getting rewarded by the state. They're doing it because they believe in what they do. And we're there all the time. In fact, yesterday was my very first vacation day since I took over the office. Wow. And I'm already regretting having taken the day off because now I'll be here on Sunday. I'd be there Saturday too, but I have a wedding to go to. So
hardly pays to take a day off or a vacation.
It doesn't pay. Yeah. But yeah, people are working very hard. The state did give us a half-time prosecutor as a special prosecutor, and that person's sole function was to work on this backlog. So that helped out tremendously. We've also now brought in 3 new attorneys this year through attrition from last year, and one of our attorneys was appointed a judge in Outagamie County, Metro Metropolis. So we also have 3 new attorneys, and the nice thing about bringing in new attorneys is that they're very aggressive and gung-ho when they first get there. But we've really set our sights on bringing down that number of cases under review, and when we started the year that was an average of 83 criminal cases per attorney under review. And as you can imagine, when you're looking at just stacks of cases that you have to address, it can really take a lot out of you.
Sure.
But now we have that to fewer than 8 cases under review per attorney. So the trick was to get us caught up. Once we were caught up, it's much easier to stay caught up. So we're doing it, but there's also another trade-off, which is the more cases we file with the number of attorneys we have, the less time we have per case. The state has us staffed at a level where we can handle 4,080 criminal cases per year, and last year was 5,713. This year I suspect we'll go over 6,000, but there's a trade-off. When you're filing 50% more cases than your office is staffed to handle, you don't have enough time for those cases. Sure. So it really is very difficult.
Sure.
And I know in one of our cases we missed filing an information within 30 days. Pretty simple oversight. It was remedied the very next week. It wasn't a problem, but it caught some publicity, and those are the types of things that are bound to happen when you're operating at 150%.
Right.
You just can't do that forever.
Sure.
But
well, speaking of publicity, I want to touch on a couple of things here that have come up in the news lately. One was a letter to the editor by a gentleman named Don Lewis, and you and I had talked before we started taping here about this. This gentleman was upset with your office. He and his wife
Right.
had been subpoenaed, just for the audience's edification. They were subpoenaed to testify at a trial. And the first problem was that due to her work, his wife was going to be out of town, I guess, the day of the
Right.
hearing, and couldn't be there. She had apparently called and visited the office several times to try getting an excuse, but whoever the prosecutor was never returned her messages, and then she finally did get an excuse, I guess. Then the day of the hearing, he was there, and from what he wrote, I think he said he was there a half an hour early.
Right.
And no one ever from your office came to approach him or speak to him or acknowledge him. Someone from the police department finally came out, told him the case had been settled without going to trial. Then about an hour and 45 minutes later, he writes, someone from your office finally showed up, told him the case was settled, but couldn't explain why no one had let any of the witnesses know. And he was pretty ticked off, and I guess felt the situation was handled with unprofessionalism
Right.
and a lack of basic courtesy. What happened there?
Well, actually, there's a couple sort of ironic things or somewhat humorous things in there. The first one is the officer that he's talking about was in contact with a prosecutor who was in court. And I think people typically believe that the district attorney's office is in charge of everything, which certainly is the case. we're attorneys who appear in courts just like any other attorney. You know, and I guess I'd challenge any attorney to walk into a courtroom and say, Judge, you're going to set this for trial on this date, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. You know, when they got out of jail the next morning, they'd probably have a different attitude in front of the judge, but you know, the courts run the program, not us. But what happens on a lot of these cases is we have multiple jury trials set for the same day. And I understand it's very difficult for witnesses and victims. It's really difficult for the DA's office. Our record so far is on one day in one courtroom we had 19 jury trials left on. Well, we have 6 courts, 1 court commissioner, 10 prosecutors. So we don't even have 19 attorneys to go in to be prepared for those cases. Fortunately, that day we were able to spare 4 prosecutors, but that's 4 prosecutors, myself included, who spent their entire weekend preparing cases for trial to show up on that day knowing only one could go, but we didn't know which one. And we can't force defendants to plead. So if they're not willing to enter a plea to the charge, our options are either dismiss the case or show up ready to go to trial. And on that day, I know we had multiple jury trials on that day, so they were trying to figure out which ones were going to resolve, which ones were going to go, if anything had to be adjourned. And I know the prosecutor was in contact with the officer and apparently had asked the officer to let the witnesses know that that defendant was going to enter a plea on his case or was entering a plea on his case and they could go. And in the letter to the editor, he commends the officer for coming and telling him what was going on, but the officer got the information from us, and certainly you can't just get up in the middle of a court appearance and say, Judge, hold on, you know, cut everything off for a second, I'll be back when I'm ready to. So, you know, we don't run the show in the courtroom. We're there, we have the same responsibilities and obligations of every other attorney, and I'm sure the attorney was in there trying to figure out what was happening on the other cases.
Sure.
So.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Lewis he wasn't aware then that the police officer had been told or had asked by your assistant DA to go and give him the message. So.
Yeah, and we get complaints like that a fair amount. A lot of times it has to do with adjournments. You know, a defense attorney will request an adjournment, the court will grant it, and somebody will send a nasty letter to us thinking that somehow or another we can tell the court that they can't do that. But I think people just generally don't really understand the district attorney's office.
Sure.
And on that day, the one thing that we could have done differently is we could have had a victim witness person over. I know one of the cases that we had that day in a different court, we had 3 victims of sexual assault. Well, we only have 3 victim witness coordinators, so you know, one of the things we have to do is we have to try to figure out who our most sensitive victims and witnesses are. And Mr. Lewis didn't pop up on the radar compared to some of the other people. If we had more victim witness people, we could have done that. You know, certainly we don't want people to feel like they're not being treated professionally or fairly by the DA's office. It's just an impossible scenario.
Sure.
If we send somebody to one court where we have an adult male who's a witness to a disorderly conduct, you know, what type of victim or witness on what type of case are we then having to abandon? And it's one of those lose-lose situations.
Sure.
Something has to come up short because the numbers don't work out.
Sure.
And
the other thing that I want to touch on real quickly here, Christian, is this made news recently too. A gentleman is being charged for killing a dog. He apparently shot a dog that his neighbors were actually dog sitting for a friend of theirs. And I don't know why this defendant shot and killed the dog, but the interesting thing about this case is it's 2 years old, approximately, and former DA Bill Lennon didn't think that it could successfully be prosecuted. And then the Sheriff's Department kind of talked back and forth with Mike Balskas in your office and kind of persuaded you guys to take another look at this, I guess. And so it is being charged now.
Correct.
And what is it? I know you can't get into specifics of the case because it is pending, but what is it that would make one DA take a look at it and say, not enough here to successfully get a conviction, and another DA like yourself and Mike Balskas looking at it and saying, you know what, we can prosecute this?
Yeah, that can be a lot of different things, and I haven't actually looked at this one. I was approached by the Sheriff's Department, and they asked if they could refer this case in which this dog had been shot. They said they had done some follow-up interviews, talked to some of the original witnesses, got some additional information, and in their opinion, the dog was shot and it wasn't justified. So they asked if they could send it back in and have it reviewed with the new information, and I said, yeah, that's fine, go ahead and send it in. And it got assigned to Mike Balskus at that point, who was our assault of crimes prosecutor, and he took a look at it and believed that based on what they had, there were enough to support criminal charges.
So there was something new that came up then?
Well, yeah, I think it was new
Lemon
information
didn't have?
from the same witnesses,
Okay.
but I never saw the original report, so I don't know how much it differed. In fact, I haven't even seen the current report, but we don't really have anything to compare it to. But sometimes there will be a break in the case, there will be something that, you know, we didn't know there was this witness, and that even happens with cases where we'll get a referral now, we'll send it back and say there's not enough. We need to get some additional information. And in fact, we typically have about 100 cases, I would say on average, at any given point in time that are back at any of our various departments for additional information. The officers will try to follow up on it, and if they can get it, they'll send it back in again.
We're down to about 3 minutes.
Okay.
So.
Does the county need a $10 million addition to a $30 million jail that was built only a few years ago?
You know, I only know some of the basics on that, and that's getting to be a difficult one to answer as well. And I know we keep on looking at different resources. With the state kind of diminishing everybody's resources, one of the things that we have is fewer prison spaces. You know, the current administration doesn't want to send inmates out of state, and for some odd reason the response seems to be, let's just put fewer people in prison, and that puts a bigger burden on county jails. So then what do you do with the people? You know, we're doing GPS, we're doing Huber, so the GPS is kind of electronic monitoring. We're looking into a possible day report center, which I think would be a phenomenal idea. It would really help alleviate some of this tension. But we also contract with, I believe, Dane County and possibly the state. Do you know if we contract with the state?
I know Dane County. I
think
both.
Okay, I think both. You know, and then you're talking about a revenue coming into the community. So if you lose the revenue, what does that do? We're already in budget crises. So
it's complicated.
It is complicated. I'm afraid I don't understand all of it, but it's something that could possibly be beneficial. If the state doesn't start picking up more of the inmates, I know we're definitely going to need more space.
One more quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
Is school truancy a problem in Winnebago County?
Not a real bad problem, and if it is, it's not to the point that it's coming to our office.
So we probably don't need a truancy court right now like they just started up in Green Bay?
Without having the numbers, I'd guess not, but I don't know how much of it is handled not coming to our office. There's a lot of things that get handled before it even comes to us. And actually at the start of this year I met with all the area police chiefs and asked them to try to find more things that they can not send to us that can be handled at a local level. Well, we're really at a point of doing triage, and we've got to focus our efforts on these serious offenders. We've got to get the drug dealers, the sex offenders, the people who are committing the really violent crimes, the stabbings. I think we're up to 7 people stabbed in this county so far this year. I think we're going to set a record for the number of homicides. I believe for the first time ever we may go into the double digits for homicides. Yeah, it's really getting out of control, and we're trying to rein it back in. But you know, when we're talking about breaking up your time and spending too much time on something, that's one of those things. If we can get rid of the truancies, the disorderly conducts, you know, those lesser offenses, give us more time to focus on these serious problems that are really taking away from the quality of life in this community. That's where I think we need to be focusing our attention.
Okay, good. So. I wish we had more time.
No, I did too. That's okay.
But I promise we'll have you back, and this time it won't be like 9 months. Okay.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, and take another day vacation.
In between now and then.
Anyway, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to take a real short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Oshkosh Common Councilor Jess King and Parks Director Tom Stephany. We'll be right back.
Just escape.
I escaped.
I escape.
By foot.
Run across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here.
I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're joined now by Jess King and Tom Stephany, who I'm sure most all of you know, if not all of you. We're here to talk about things going on with the Millers Bay fishing pier again, and some related issues to that. Of course, we've heard a little over 2 years now about the fishing pier. It's it's like the gift that keeps on giving in a different kind of way, I guess. It was a gift from the Otter Street Fishing Club. It's been a bone of contention for neighbors and some other citizens. They don't want it there. We could rehash all the reasons why, but Jess, you are bringing this back now. Earlier this year, an administrative law judge actually ruled on this and said it could be installed or constructed. He did kind of stay that decision for 2 months pending a possible appeal. Next month, I believe it is, that 2 months is up, isn't it? Sometime in November.
November 25th is when construction can begin.
November 25th?
Yes, but
okay.
it's been longer than 2 months actually. So.
All right. And now, Jess, you're wanting to have the council rescind that decision to actually approve it and allow it to go in. And there's a few different things going on. You want to do that, then you want to establish a gift policy for the city. And you also have been approached about some complaints about a girls' softball league, and they don't feel that they're being treated as fairly as other groups. So we want to touch on all these things, but I think it'd be best probably if we discuss them separately and then give each of you a chance to kind of respond.
Because we only have a half hour and we can go back if that's
so
okay.
let's get the rescission out of the way first. A possible rescission. Why and what's the likelihood after all these hoops have been jumped through already?
Sure, I'll start out by saying the format of the resolution to rescind the gift, it's in that form because that's the only option that's really left at this point to even discuss it. And one of the reasons, the pier lives on, I guess, is because I had some constituents contact me. I wasn't sitting on the council at the time, and I recognize that for some people that's a bone of contention. I'm trying to be revisionist, and some people feel that way. But how I really feel about the situation is, as an attorney, I'm very much aware of ideas of due process and notion of fairness and notice and concepts of notice and citizens having the ability to approach the appropriate body and get a fair shake out of it. And I feel that the citizens in question here weren't given correct notice to discuss this before the council. And I also believe, if you read Chapter 62, that in fact, this type of improvement should have gone to the Planning Commission for review and approval based on State Statute 62. So I guess inherently I felt there was problems with the process as far as who got notice, when they got an opportunity to be heard, and then what forum they got an opportunity to be heard. And regardless of what the outcome is, you know, it could be that I'm a lone duck counselor and this is my isolated sandbag, and you know, this it could be that. But what I really want is these citizens to have an opportunity to come to a Tuesday night meeting and say, these are the reasons why we think this isn't appropriate, and to be heard. And that's different than giving them a private listening session on a different day. That's different than taking constituent phone calls and saying, yes, yes, I understand you're upset, but there's nothing we can do. And that's different than passing the buck and saying, well, this is going to be a DNR decision or an administrative law judge decision, when in fact the DNR and the administrative law judge could only discuss the issues of safety. They couldn't discuss the issues of land use or planning, which in my mind, this is truly where the bone of contention is that Otter Street wants the pier in a particular place, and the people in the neighborhood are saying, you know, not in my backyard, not in that park. And then there's other people that are park users that say, well, maybe not there, maybe somewhere else. Ultimately, I think it's a great gift. Ultimately, I think there's definitely a need. There's always a need for communities to give gifts like this. It's just saying where really should it be, and then how involved should people be in decisions that impact their neighborhood, you know? And I think anybody would say, whether it's a road construction project, whether it's a parking lot zoning issue, people want to feel like they have a chance to approach their government and be heard. So that's why I brought it up.
Okay. I will just say this. I agree with you that this was really hurried through. Tom had used the words fast track himself in one of your very early memos, I think. Some years ago, 2+ years ago.
4 months. Yeah.
He's got it down to the month. Yeah. Excellent. But at this stage of the game, see, and I don't think that that's the proper place for it either. So, you know, you got me on both those points. I'm in your corner. I guess where I'm having a little bit of a problem with this is, I mean, they've come to the council so many different times, you know, on different occasions. They've had a hearing before an administrative law judge. I mean, do you really think that another time in front of the council is going to make any difference?
Well, I think it makes a difference because it's a Tuesday night regular meeting, and they should have an idea of how their counselors feel about it. And it could not. In my mind, though, I feel that if constituents contact me with a concern, it's my job to respond to that, and that's how I feel.
And that's a fair response. Tom, what are your thoughts on this?
With regard to that fishing pier, staff has talked about a fishing pier being located in at that spot long before Otter Street came in, but again, it was just talk. There was never any intent to ramrod it through or fast track it through. There was never any intent. And here's how the story really goes. We had a parks tour schedule. Usually we take the parks board out and look at different parks during the summer. So we had that already scheduled. The Otter Street group came to me about a week before. So they just voted on donating us $40,000. They'd like to have this fishing pier constructed in Menai Park at the location that's being contested right now. And you know, I guess we can do business wherever we are scheduled to do our business, and we properly noted everything. And then they asked, after that, they asked if I would talk with the city manager, former Richard Wallink, if he would put it on the council agenda for the very next night. And I said, I'll do that. So, again, we put it on the Parks Board agenda. I talked to Richard, and I said, it's a great gift. You know, it's something we've talked about. And really, we talked about, we don't think this is going to be controversial. We never thought it was going to explode like it did. And so it was put on the council agenda. So the Park Board approved it on that Monday night. There was discussion at the council level on that next night. In fact, Chuck Williams, one of the people, you know, that opposes the fishing pier, he was at that council meeting. So there was some different discussion. The council actually, there was a motion to table the project, at least until further review could be scheduled. That didn't pass, so then the council came back and voted 5-1 to support the offer. So that was really the start of the whole thing, and then of course the process has continued on for the last 2 years and 4 months.
Right,
and there's
and,
been
and
a variety
5
of
to
meetings.
1, let me just say 5 to 1 because Paul Esslinger was not there at that first time when it was voted on.
Right.
So.
I want to clarify whether this pier is supposed to be for developmentally disabled at all.
It is.
All right. Then I would like you to look at our monitor because I want to show you 2 photographs that my wife and I have collected of piers in the state of Wisconsin that have been developed with American for Disability Act and see if the design as you know it meets or anywhere near those 2. So our camera person, now the first one will show, this is the Mirror Lake State Park near Baraboo.
I'm quite familiar with that.
This is a model, and we can see it in our mind. That's a model pier for disabled. Is the pier in Millers Bay going to look anything like this?
Nope, there will be no railings.
So it probably won't meet ADA.
It does. We had at our hearing this May, we had one of the experts that used to work with the DNR. He probably wrote a lot of the language for the standards in Wisconsin. His name is Jeff Pagels. He is handicapped. He's in a wheelchair. He gave an outstanding testimony. He highly suggested that it's better not to have the rails or the railings than to have them.
Okay. Now I want to turn to another one. This is up in Appleton. And I don't have a photograph, so you'll have to look at. This is another one that's been designed specifically for disabled. And so you're saying that this pier, if built, isn't going to be anywhere near, which is a premier park for disabled in the state park system, and one that's up in Appleton.
Well, I don't know the standards very well. I'm basing that design on what this Jeff Pagels did. Again, he's been involved with these type of projects. He used to be the grant administrator for the DNR in this area, so he's worked with a lot of projects like this. I don't know if this is a standard that existed a few years back. All I know is he highly suggested that what we're going to construct there is going to well meet the standards.
Will the city own the pier once it's finished?
Yes.
So someone, if these standards are so much different against the model park in Appleton, you could be taken to federal court for violation of ADA, couldn't you?
I would think if you got an expert witness suggesting that the design is sufficient, I mean, we're relying on his expertise and the DNR's expertise to suggest that what's going to be constructed out there is going to be A-OK.
Well, let me just interject. Anyone can take anyone to court, as Councilor King knows. And we would have to, if someone sued the city would have to mount a defense.
Right.
And I suspect if you're going to federal court, it's going to be a pretty hefty defense.
Right.
Well,
ADA is
whether
a
or not
fairly
they'd
important
win,
federal
that's a whole
statute
other
too.
thing.
Okay. I just wanted to get that out, clear up the handicap portion of the pier.
Tom, what would be wrong with putting railings around there? I mean, why tempt the fates? Someone in a wheelchair could easily, especially if they're out there in inclement weather, as some people do like to fish when it's raining. If you're in a wheelchair, it may very well or could easily slip off. I mean, accidents do happen. What's the problem with putting a railing on it?
Well, I gotta check my notes. The original design might have had a rail on it, but then when the controversy and the perceptions that it's going to decrease in the beauty of the area, I think the plan was modified. But I'm going to say that unofficially. I got to again check some of my notes. If you look at a lot of our docks, you know, whether it's boat transient docks or our boat launch docks, even some of our fishing pier. Now I know the Michigan Street one has a rail all the way around it, but we do have a lot of dock space that doesn't have any rails, and we do have handicapped people fishing from those docks. So,
but you promoted this as a fishing pier for disabled.
It is. It is still being promoted that way.
Okay.
Well, of course, the difference, I think, Tom, at least in my mind, between what this fishing pier is and these docks and so forth is they're pretty close to the shoreline. This goes out how many feet?
100 feet.
That's quite a ways out, and I think it's potentially a lot deeper probably out there, especially for someone handicapped. But
okay.
What has the Parks Board discuss this in any kind of a formal capacity since knowing that it was going to be brought back?
Not really, even though members of the neighborhood have appeared before the Parks Board to register their concerns and their issues. And again, that was earlier on in the process. It was not so much during the last year or so.
Okay.
You haven't appeared before the Advisory Park Board either, have you?
I have not.
Okay.
No. One of my hopes, I mean, to get into the bigger discussion here about gift policies is just, I really believe there's two models about how we as a community can approach this. Part of it has to do with our comprehensive planning as a community. And you look at efforts that the Community Foundation made with the Leach Amphitheater or with the Pollock Pool, and they say, you know, we have this plan, now we're looking for community civic interested groups to help us build it. You know, and then there's this other type of gift where you have special interest groups, whether it be a girls softball organization or the Otter Street Fishing Pier, where they kind of say, you know what, wouldn't it be great if we had this user gift that we see a benefit for our community to have? And then how do you get their vision and dream to fit into our comprehensive planning and then get neighborhood support? And I think, you know, conversations I've had with Tom too say, you know, where we are really concerned about what neighborhoods and what community, you know, what areas think. The other issue is to say we have a scarce resource. In the council meeting, last council meeting I mentioned, Oshkosh has 3.6 acres per thousand, and the average nationwide is 10.6 acres per thousand. So we have limited park recreation resources. And
you have limited budgets to go beyond the 3.
Right, and so that's the catch here, is when you've got these people making these arguments, oh, pristine space, or oh, softball diamond, or dog park, or fishing pier. It's trying to balance those interests and say, what is our comprehensive plan? And how do we treat people with equal access?
You probably feel that pressure every day, huh?
Yeah, this will be a challenge.
Let's talk about the gift policy. I mean, you know, I think it sounds like a good idea. What are your specific ideas with respect to such a policy?
Well, I think we need to make clear the process of what the approval process is for a gift. We need to have a notice opportunity for citizens who are interested in what are the future plans and who is proposing a gift. You know, where can I find this information online? So I have, or at the city hall to say, well, what's really going on and what can I be a part of? So I think there's a, you know, that issue, and then I think there needs to be a procedure notification to the group saying, you know, this is how our city departments are going to review this, you know, this is the timeline, this is when we expect to get back to you, and you know, maybe this is the time where we have questioning or open hearing about the gift. So there's some known timeline. And then I guess a follow-up, because you know, now that I've talked to Tom more about the girls softball situation, you know, that's been long in process, you know, of them trying to work with the city to get this done. And you know, it's not as smooth as one would think, you know, and I guess you look at the pier and you say, well, that's also been an over 2-year process, and so, you know, how can we make these things a little more smooth and apparent, or, you know.
Jess, you don't have a policy draft, though, for next Tuesday night?
I do not, no. I wanted to start with this to have a discussion, and honestly, I'm going to a urban development conference in New Jersey in about 6 weeks, and taking some of my own personal time to go do that. And one of the things I plan to discuss or get ideas from there is how do they handle gift policies. So it's in the works.
Well, and too, you know, it might be a good idea when you come back armed with that knowledge to sit down with department heads who are in the position to receive gifts, and all of you kind of put your heads together and collectively come up with something that everybody can live with.
And I think Tom knows, I mean, I'm pretty friendly and amenable. I'm not doing this to like attack administration or say this is a, you know, this is a hatchet job. What I'm really trying to do is kind of have a remedy, a wholeness thing, and I just feel these citizens should be heard in that forum, and that's going to make this better. Whether or not it passes, maybe people don't agree. That's fine with me.
Is this symptomatic of not having an alderman form of government? Would this have happened if there would have been a city council member representing that area of the city?
I think inherently, this is my personal opinion, I think aldermanic forms of government inherently move slower. So Dan, you know, you may be right on that. I don't know if that's true though, because you also have the trade-offs in aldermanic government where if you have one representative, you know, maybe the other interests have enough votes to still push you by. So I don't know if that's true.
What do you think, Tom?
Excuse me.
Any form of government. The reason these two projects have been hanging there for so long, I think it has to do more with legal issues, I guess, if you will. I mean, if you know, I guess that's the right term, but you know, we had the DNR hearing with the fishing pier, and then they were able to contest it, and you know, then we went from one process to the next process, and we ended up this last May with 2 days. You know, was there like 18 hours of testimonial with the administrative law judge. With regard to the Fast Club, we actually were moving along fairly well. We did have an agreement in place last February.
Well, let me just interrupt you for a second, Tom, because I don't know that much about it.
I don't either.
Viewers
other
don't
than what
either.
you said.
So what really, who's asking for what? And then you can pick up on where
it's a great group of families that are trying to promote girls softball in this town.
Okay.
And they came to us, the Parks Board, in 2004, just to see if there would be any interest in us supporting them using Quarry Park. They didn't have any money or any funds at that time, but yes, you know, go ahead, let's take a look at this. Well, they came back about 2 years later, ready to go, and that's when we started moving the process along. And you know, we talk about processes here. I have to admit, this fishing pier is probably the only time we didn't have some kind of a process in place with projects. So going back to the Quarry Park thing, we involved the neighborhood. We had a couple of different meetings with the Parks Board, and then once it was approved by the Parks Board, we moved it along to the council. And I worked directly with the officers of Fast Club. We drafted an agreement. It was pretty much based on what we had with the Oshkosh Youth Baseball Association. And you know, here, review this. Do you like it? You know, yeah, we liked it. Okay, we took it to the council and it passed. Well, then they decided to send it to their attorney after the fact. You know, and I think, and that's where it's been hung up ever since. Part of the deal there has to do with the environmental issues at Quarry Park. That's a landfill. You know, with some new topsoil put in that might have some concerns, and so that's been a real hang up. But I was ready to start, or we were start the project probably this spring already. So
where is it at right now?
We're just waiting until all the I's can be dotted and the T's can be crossed on the agreement, or with the agreement.
So the DNR issues are resolved?
Yeah, those are pretty much. It's pretty much. Well, I think, I'm not sure, but it's really with the Public Works Director now and the city attorney and actually their attorney.
Okay.
And so what's interesting about that then is to talk about processes is now meanwhile these parents are left to wonder, well, what's wrong with this picture? Why is it taking so long? You know, and then you have some parents contacting me saying, well, I'm going to go out to the town of Nakaimai, or I'm going to go to an outlying area where I don't feel the same pressures or problems. You know, if not Quarry Park, if it's an environmental problem, well, what other space do you have for us? You know, and those are the issues. And it's really to say, you know, if we define a process, you know, maybe there's a way where citizens or interested parties can get an updated information and feel a little more secure that this didn't just go into a black hole. And we're thankful for your gift, and we want you to work with the city. We don't want you to go to other municipalities because we want Oshkosh girls to play softball in Oshkosh. I mean, so inherently, you know, it's just, you know, how do we treat these interest groups, these civic groups, you know, and give them the best fit that they can have.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that. I mean, Quarry Park's a great fit for this group. It's a perfect fit. I mean, we need to do something. We need to develop that park in a specific way, and it just provides them a great opportunity. So, like I suggested, just be patient. You know, sometimes government works a little slower, but
well, and anytime you get the DNR involved, I mean, look at with the former Pioneerian.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
so
that's been.
It's going to happen. So. I think it's going to be a good spot for them. You know, we just got to get over one little more hump or two, and that's it.
Okay.
Do you think this project would have been fast-tracked if you would have had a woman on your Parks Advisory Board? I mean, you had Otter Street Fishing Club members on your board, still on your board, and that goes through real quick.
Well, we have one Otter Street.
Well, okay, well, all right. But, you know, why aren't women on the Parks Advisory Board?
We do have one.
Do you?
Yeah, we've had more than one in the past. So, yeah, we've had up to 3 or 4 at one time.
Thinking that, you know, women getting more involved. This is girls softball. You know, might have.
Oh, it's actually more the males on the board that are supportive of the fast pitch.
Right, just checking. Yeah.
Who's the woman who's on the board?
Kay Hansen.
Okay. Yeah, I did not.
She's been on for a minute.
I did not aware that she was on there. I apologize.
Okay. Tom, you had mentioned something that kind of struck me as a little interesting. You said that the Miller's Park or Miller's Bay fishing pier thing was the only time that on a project the neighborhood wasn't involved. What happened there that fell between the cracks?
Well, again, you know, here's the nice gift. We believe, well, we still believe, yeah, as staff, and you know that it's a good fit. And the main key element is we didn't think it would be controversial. I mean, first of all, if you look at Menominee Park, and you all know Menominee Park very well, we have the real active area, which is south of pretty much Webster Stanley, except for one soccer field. So that's the active area. That's the softball. That's, you know, basketball and things like that. Most of the area north is considered passive recreation, and that's the type of activity you got up there. Kite flying, you got the trail with inline skating and jogging and that. Well, this particular pier is a good fit for passive recreation. I mean, that's all it is passive recreation. There's not going to be boats pulling up to this thing, anything like that. It's just going to be a person sitting at the end of that pier, throwing a fishing line out and hopefully catching a bunch of fish. So it is a good fit.
Of course, the softball league thing you said is a good fit too for Quarry Park, but people got the neighborhood involved there. So I'm still trying to figure out why the neighbors weren't involved in this fishing pier.
Well, again, like I said, nobody thought, well, they wanted to get it done. Otter Street wanted to get it done. Again, they weren't trying to ramrod it through, but we started the process in June. Hopefully, once we got through the process, they wanted to get it constructed so people could still enjoy it that summer. That was the other thing I didn't suggest. But so it was a matter that they wanted to get it done. They wanted the families and the kids and the people of the community to be able to use it yet that summer. Plus, nobody thought it was going to be controversial.
Okay, go ahead.
An interesting motion passed at the last meeting. Tony Palmieri moved to appoint John Fitzpatrick, the acting city manager. A 7-0 vote. No discussion, no nothing.
I was surprised.
Stu Rickman opined that, you know, how did this happen?
Sure.
Any talking before the vote?
No, I'll tell you, I don't know how many people are aware that Richard sent us council members all an email saying who his preference was to be city manager. And he gave us 2 names, and he, in the email, had suggested that these people either be considered together or separately. And so I think that was just the first motion that came out, and I mean, let's put it this way. In my opinion, as a council, you know, the 2 meetings prior, you know, as this term keeps going around about us making sausage, and I think all of us are starting to realize that, you know, maybe you pick your battles, and in this situation, I was confident with both names, and that was the first one that came up.
And so his was one of the 2 names?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
well, that explains it, but I mean, a 7-0 vote, no discussion on this council on something
I know, right? But that's why I think we're all a little tired at that point.
Well, that's, yeah, okay.
And honestly, both the names were, you know, qualified people, and that was the first one that came up, and that I'm fine with that name. So I have confidence in John.
And the other name was Dave Patek,
Dave
right?
Patek, yes. Yeah. So, and they were proposed as, well, you know, from Richard's point of view, they were both qualified, and you either pick one or pick the other or pick both. I personally didn't like the idea of having co-acting managers because then I think that confuses people. And so I think, you know, maybe that's what the others thought, but that was my reason for voting for John.
Thanks for the explanation. It surprised me it went so quick.
If only everything else could.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thanks to both of you very much for being here. We appreciate it, and we'll be anxiously watching Tuesday night to see what happens with this. Is it going to be 2 separate things that you're, 2 separate motions then, or 2 separate
Well, there's the
ordinances
resolution about the rescission of the gift. And in my mind, it's a bigger issue. I just, because of the timeline of November 25th, that we needed to have that resolution up so as people could feel they had a chance to express themselves. But the rest of it will take a few months, I think.
Okay, very good. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dan, thanks to the crew, and as always, thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep your eye on us. We've got Our Eye on Oshkosh.